when there is room for warmth and some levity when you're talking about grief, which is what I do all day long, every day, then you need to grab onto it, because I guarantee you're going to feel like crap again. Like, don't worry, like you'll feel sad again. You're going to feel like it's hard again. You're going to feel upset. So when a moment of levity and lightness pops up, like, why wouldn't you take it? Why wouldn't you have a good laugh that's like about something really dark?
My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too. Hey, happy week to all, or sad week to y'all, depending on how you are doing. It's Chels, who else? I'm Chelsea London Lloyd. And I'm the host of Dying of Laughter, where every week we interview comedians and funny at heart humans about the losses of their parents and siblings. Feeling really good, feeling all the feels after my play Blaze closed and my next play Wide Open has opened. So I'm performing almost every night in Los Angeles this month, which is wild. And as you heard me share last week and possibly the week before, I was playing a suicidal comedian in Blaze, based on a real comedian who died by suicide in 2018. And in Wide Open, I'm performing my original work, sharing a story about mentorship throughout the pandemic, where I was mentoring a grieving child. So lots of grief themes here. And no matter where you are, you can check out the Wide Open Zoom link. It is on Sunday, May 15th. It'll be at 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern. The show is called Wide Open. It's with the Braid Theater, formerly referred to as the Jewish Women's Theater. So if you'd like to come, send me a DM and we can set up some comps or discounted tickets via Zoom. Anyone can come. Super exciting. Okay, today we have the founder, the CEO, the one and only creator of the Modern Loss community, Rebecca Soffer. She is one of the grief titans that you should know. Her online account, Modern Loss, is just exceptional. The memes are hilarious and poignant. Her first book, Modern Loss, Candid Conversation About Grief, Beginner's Welcome, was named by The Strategist as the best book on loss for a younger generation. I had her on last year where she talks about her personal story, having lost her mom at age 30 and her dad at age 34. Her writing has appeared in outlets such as the New York Times, Marie Claire, Glamour, and NBC, and she's a former producer for the Colbert Report and a Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. My sister also went to Columbia for law school. Yay, Columbia. I did not go, but we support these badass women who did. She lives in New York with her husband, 2 sons, and her Labradoodle. Now today we are talking about the brand new book that just became available yesterday. It is called The Modern Loss Handbook, an interactive guide to moving through grief and building your resilience. It is so powerful, you guys. The theme here is staying connected to your person, yourself, and the world around you in the aftermath of loss. I got a sneak peek preview copy, so I've been able to read it cover to cover. There's beautiful illustrations, lots to read, and also an interactive portion. It's not a traditional journal, so there's plenty to read, whether you feel like participating or not. Of course, I recommend that you do, but if you're just getting your feet wet with all of this and your emotions and how you want to figure out your emotions in relationship to your grief, this book is for you. If you're very comfortable with your grief, this book is for you. If you're just like, what the fuck, grief is overwhelming, let me check it out. This book is for you. And you will know more about the book and Rebecca's personality and the reason that she wrote it in our interview, which we'll play here in just a moment. I'm so proud of her and proud to know her that this is her first book she published solely on her own. Her last book she co-authored, which is also tremendous. And in this guide, you'll find no worn out platitudes or empty assurances, because we've got prompts, creative projects, innovative rituals, and therapeutic-based exercises. Yes, this is the place to explore the messy, long arc of loss on your own timeline and without judgment. I just adore her. Again, a grief titan, a great human, a funny producer, a hardworking mom, and a badass grief moderator and expert. The very funny, the very cool. Okay, this is getting way too hyped, but please, Rebecca Soffer, pop on over here and let's jump into your story, because I adore you. This is absolutely so exciting that your second book is out in the world. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to talk with you more about the book and about you. So how are you feeling now that it's live?
I feel like it feels weird to say I feel good, because it's like a book about grief, but
Yes.
I think anyone listening, I mean, you totally get it because you create things. There's this period where you're just like in your head and doing it alone. And you're like, does this make sense to anyone but me? And does it even make sense to me? And so, it's terrifying sometimes to put something that you created from scratch into the world. But it's exciting too, because it's something that I really believed in while I was writing it. And beforehand, I really believed in this. And so I feel like in some ways, it's like the most confident product I put out there because I wrote it in like the depths of COVID. I mean, we're still in the depths of COVID, but last winter of like 2020, 2021, when we were just so lonely and so isolated, and I just like was so alone in my room writing this. And I just had like zero fucks left to give. I was just like, I'm just going to say what I have to say. And I think that lack of filter really helped me because I just didn't care. I was like, I'm so lucky to be writing this book. I feel so scared about the world. I'm just going to like put this out there. And I feel like it shows. So I feel proud, not because I think it should win like, the Pulitzer, but because I feel like it's very true to me.
Beautiful. And hey, I think it should win the Grief Pulitzer. What's the equivalent of the Grief Pulitzer?
The Pulitzer.
Yes, that's what this
The
is. This is
shitty Pulitzer, I guess, for like the grief. Yeah, I don't know. We should come up with that.
Can there be a grief award ceremony? Because if so, you win.
Yeah.
And I'll see you on the carpet. What would that carpet look like? I don't know. A bunch of people crying.
It would look like a mess. It would be a mess.
Yeah. I'm kind of into it.
It'd be one of those like woven carpets, like the ones that you make like on a loom and you keep like, snagging on your stilettos, and like it would literally look like a disaster. And you'd fall like every 2 steps.
And the food is like chicken noodle soup and matzo ball soup, and just like sad foods and like the food.
Right. It's only Shiva food and like ham casseroles and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of Shiva, I so wish, we live on opposite coasts.
We might be hatching an idea at this moment, which might come to fruition at some point.
Now is something else to consider. And I wish on that note, you could have been to my Jewish funeral birthday party 2 weeks ago, which again, we live on different coasts, but right up your alley. Okay, back to you. So, Rebecca, the goal of this handbook is to help you do 3 things, as you say: stay connected to the person who died, stay connected to the world around you, and of course, staying connected to yourself. So I'm curious, how have you personally used interactivity, journaling, and the written word to move through your own grief?
I just want to be clear that it's not like a workbook. It's not a journal. It's called the Modern Loss Handbook because it's more like a field guide, right? It's a guide. It's got a lot of research in it. It's got a lot of personal, suggestions from the modern loss community, but it also does have interactive portions. So it does have lots of parts where you can write in it, but it's like 220 pages long. And those aren't all those pages. And I wanted to make it interactive because I feel like no matter where you're at with like your experience in loss, if it's, a month in, if it's a million months in, you always need an invitation to kind of reflect on where you're at, right? I mean, I really believe that we shouldn't just think about our grief or our loss just during that first year. It's like it's a 24/7, 365-day thing for the rest of our days. And I think that we have an evolving relationship with the people that we lost as we move through our own lives and as our lives ebb and flow and we take on different roles or lose different roles or maybe reach the ages of that they were when they died or whatnot. And so I really feel like when I've been helped myself, not by feeling like I had to write the next year of magical thinking, like journaling, but by doing short exercises. Because when you're grieving, like you don't always want to just like, in early days of grief, I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't get through a book. I couldn't get through a magazine article. Like I could get through tweets. I could read a tweet. Like that's what I could do.
Right.
Unfortunately, I wasn't on Twitter when my mom died in 2006. So I don't know that I would have even read tweets because it wasn't possible for me. I got an announcement that I started my Twitter account in 2007. So I feel like these short, very targeted questions that I ask, they're very narrowly focused and they help you to think about something particular. It's not like I'm like, look at this sunset and like, let me know how you're feeling. No, it's like, are there any things I ask very specific questions in the part about like staying connected to your person, about memory. I will really truly ask you, like, was there anything they ever did that they never apologized for, or that you wish they had apologized for? Or like, what was like their funniest joke? Or like, is what was a place that, what do you think their biggest accomplishment was? And what do they think your biggest accomplishment was? Like, there are a lot of ways in which I'm trying to kind of like jog your thinking, but they're very targeted. Like, they're not meant to like make you feel stressed out. If you don't have an answer to the question, don't answer it. But guess what? You might as time goes by, or you might remember, or it might come to you, or whatever. But like, the interactive portion is meant to be very user friendly, very bite sized, because that's what grief is. And like, if it comes to when you want to write your personal year of magical thinking, you absolutely have my blessing and encouragement. But this is meant to kind of take the pressure off that and still let you feel some sort of, maybe they could spark some thinking about deeper writing or longer form writing that you might want to do. Maybe you do want to do that essay. Maybe you do want to do that book. Or maybe you just want to write like a sentence in response to my question that might help you and might help you say, oh, this is something I want to talk to my friend about, or a therapist. Like, it's really meant to kind of like help you move your experience with loss, not like forward, because it's not always forward, but like just move it a little bit.
Yes, I love what you're saying. And one of my favorite things about this guide is that I feel like a lot of journals, which are fantastic, there's a lot of blank space and blank pages, and it might feel more intimidating as where to begin. And you're really walking through the individual through, like, here's a suggestion, here's an exercise, here's an idea, and then here's more of this person's story and my story. It just feels very accessible and a great way to jump in and get started, like you're saying. So that's like, I wanted to compliment you on that, which is why I think this is so unique. And there's
Thank
really
you.
not something like it. So that is wonderful. I'm wondering what it was like in your writing process. Did you know how much of your story you wanted to tell versus having it be interactive with the photos? I think you just did it so beautifully. And I wonder what your creative process was like in getting it to this place. Did you have the vision for this guide exactly as it is from day one? How did you get to this place where it was so beautifully woven of the braid of a book and a journal and photos? How did it come to be?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's a very, very nice thing to say, and I really appreciate it. Second, yeah, I mean, I did have a pretty specific vision for this. I've wrote the proposal a long time ago, a long time ago, before COVID. Really wanted to do this kind of project. Had a lot of ideas in my head, came very close to doing it, didn't happen for one reason or another. And then it was just kind of this thing where I was like, all right, well, I mean, I have a lot of other things to do and I work for myself. So everything is always really busy. And then COVID hit, obviously, March 2020, we can all remember. And it just felt like there was this sense of urgency because everybody in the modern loss community was dealing with all of this resurfaced grief. They were dealing with new triggers. They were dealing with like, now like the loss of their coping mechanisms, like that brunch that they figured out was their sanity every month, or the CrossFit class, or just like like that time in the office that was like the space away from the house where their husband used to be and isn't there anymore. That was all gone. And so there was just this deep, very immediate need from the community for more connection points and more conversation than they ever felt like they needed about grief, about loss. And they realized, like, including I did, how incredibly rich the grief experience is. And when I say rich, I mean like it's really fucking painful sometimes, right? Like I'm not like, oh, it's rich and fascinating. I mean, it is rich and fascinating, but like that doesn't mean it's not really hard and painful while you're moving through it. And especially when you're having a lot of triggers and you're feeling like you're back in a place, those early days of COVID where you were just like, oh my God, like, what does the world look like? Like, what is my life going to look like? What does anything look like? That's kind of how you feel when you're in your early days of grief. And a lot of people felt like they were back in those moments of their early grief. And so I just was like, okay, this is a thing that I think I can write that can help people with their own grief, because I'm just one person and I'm also living in early COVID. And I also have nuclear family members in my own house who are really sick. And I don't know when they're going to be okay. And I also still don't know how I'm going to like make a living because I did a lot of things in person and now I have to do them virtually. And I'm also like freaking the fuck out because there's an election coming up. So I was like, this is my way of writing something that can hit a lot of people, that can really help a lot of people. And I can be everybody's friend and guide, but like through my written word, not just like, not like every single day talking to them. And so that's where the urgency came. And I pitched the book and sold it very quickly. I kind of rewrote the proposal, which I felt was so much richer and more nuanced and profound because it was in COVID times, and also it was in the throes of like the George Floyd protests. And oh my God, there was just so much going on in the world. And I was so sad. And I felt like there was just so much grief. And I think that it was really reflected in that proposal, which also still carried a lot of levity. And so I felt so lucky to be charged with this project and to, have a publisher who really wanted it for me, who really saw my vision, who really understood that like it needed to be in full color, it needed to be illustrated, that the illustrations needed to enhance the writing and vice versa. Like it wasn't a black and white thing. That I just like went to town on it. And I remember there was this moment where I was writing, and then I looked up after a few days and I was like, oh my God, this definitely just is not in my proposal. Like, I don't know what the hell is coming out right now, but like, I'm kind of into it, but it's not in the proposal. And I called my friend, Tim Federley, actually, who is like the dearest. I adore him. He's a dear friend. He runs High School Musical, the series, has the new show Better Nate Than Ever on Disney Plus, and just happens to be
Amazing.
like one of my favorite people. And just coincidentally, somebody who's really believed in modern loss since literally before it even existed online, like was never the person who was like, that sounds morbid or you're kind of morose. And I called him and I was like, I don't know what's coming out here, but it's not exactly what I said I was going to do in some ways. And he said back, I remember this. I was like standing on like a stoop in suburban Philadelphia outside my uncle's house last spring. And he said, just let the book be the book. And I was like, okay. And he's like, just let it be whatever. Like, let it be what it's going to be. And that was like the best thing. It was so simple, but like I hadn't just really thought that, like, just gotta like see what happens, and trust your gut.
Yes.
And so that was my process, which was like thinking I knew exactly what I was doing, realizing that that was like 64% correct, and then really owning that remaining, oh my God, I'm like literally doing math in my head, 36%.
Impressive. That is better.
Thank you. I did not realize there would be math during today's interview.
Yeah, no, that you brought it on, but then you dotted the I, you crossed the T. That was nice.
Yes, thank you.
No, I love that advice thank you, Tim. Isn't it so powerful when someone says something to you in a way that you can really hear it and take it in and moves you forward? And isn't it cool that you're that person for so many people who are going to buy this book? What? Plug. No, truly, I love when someone says something like that. So that's really cool to hear a little bit more about a peek behind the curtain of you getting to this place.
And also like a nice tip for anybody who's doing their thing, like anybody who's like doubting themselves. I mean, you have to understand, you get it. You run a grief podcast, you get it. I've had so many people over the years be like, God, like literally, like the translation would be like, what you're doing sounds creepy to me. You freak me out a little bit. And I'm like, I don't think I come across as creepy. I'm a pretty smiley person. I used to work in comedy. I'm just doing my thing because I know there's a need for it. So that's that. And so I feel like, I don't know what to say. Like, I think it's a good tip for anybody who's doing something that maybe goes against the grain of what society thinks is acceptable or normal. You just got to go with it. You got to like, sounds so cliches are cliche for a reason. You really need to let the thing be what it's going to be and trust your gut.
Just taking a deep breath and taking that in. I think everyone listening might need to hear that, creative or otherwise. For someone new to journaling with some hesitation about quote unquote going there with their grief, how might they use this tool, and what might you say to someone who's having resistance when it comes to the written word?
Well, I would say don't worry about it. That you can first just read the book, like no one's forcing you to hold a pen or, a pencil in your hand and write down all of your deep, dark secrets in this book. And if you do, the book's not going to tell anyone. Like, that's cool. Like, it's pretty good at keeping secrets because it's an inanimate
That's amazing.
object. So, like, just don't worry. Like, it's not going to bite you. You know, this, in fact, is like probably the safest space to explore some of your thoughts and feelings. And like I said earlier, you know, these are bite-sized things. I'm not asking you to like write this like awful, heartbreaking, you know, essay that is going to like open this can of worms. I'm just asking you to kind of like jog your brain a little bit and jog your emotions and see where you're at, because you might want to take that to another place at some point with somebody else, with your own creations. Like maybe, you know, like I'm not saying you want to start your own grief blog, but maybe you do, or maybe you want to start an Instagram account or do an artistic project based on, you know, some of your answers, or maybe you just want to like live in a different way based on some of the answers that are coming up. And so I would say, don't be scared. It's cool. Like these questions are very, very specific. Some of them are quite easy to answer. You know, there's a whole section about navigating social dynamics, like, and friendships after loss, navigating and negotiating them, because they are a
Yes, I love
negotiation.
that.
And I feel like the unspoken reality a lot of the times is that you're going to lose friends when you have a loss. Chances are you're not going to lose all your friends. You may not lose even a lot of them, but not everybody is going to be able to hang comfortably with what you're going through. And that's not your fault. It's our fault as a society because we're not good at this. It's not even their fault. It's just our fault. And that's what I, in part, you know, along with many other people, am trying to change, the normalizing of this conversation. And so, you know, yeah, like it's a book, read it. There's a part where I literally tell you, rip a page out and then put it back together, do all the other stuff, and then do the writing. Or throw it across the room and leave it for a couple months and then come back to it. Like this is an evergreen book. It doesn't have to be used at any moment in time, all together or in pieces.
Beautiful. So in our first interview, we talked a lot more about your personal story, which I will link to this episode, and you can learn, everyone listening, you can learn more about Rebecca's personal story. But just to share and honor you and your own loss, if you could just speak to your own losses of your parents, and curious, how do you stay connected to your parents, and or how do you wish you stay connected to them, and what comes up for you when I say this around your own rituals?
I mean, I stay connected to my parents in so many different ways. You know, for me, a lot of it is like with my kids. My older son has this expression that looks just like my dad, and my dad never met him. Like they'll never meet each other. And whenever that expression happens and I happen to be there, I'm like, Noah, oh my God, like it's Grandpa Ray. Like you're right there. It's so it's creepy to me. Like jeans are a very creepy thing, you know? And I stop him and I tell him, I'm like this, and then I try and like tell a story based around it. Or like, you know, yeah, like the other day we were talking about, I mean, like I don't normally get to say anecdotes like that, but like the other day I was in Rome. I was at the Colosseum with my children,
That's amazing. Did you have the best time?
as one never is. And we were talking about World War II, and I don't know. And then I was like, you know, your grandpa was actually in World War II because my dad was older than my mom. And he was like asking all these questions and whatever. And I found that like it doesn't always have to be a forced thing. Like I used to feel like staying connected to my parents had to be this like really forced thing. It had to be like, okay, look at the to-do list. Okay, like get groceries, do this work, you know, have this phone call, stay connected with mom. You know, like I used to feel like very pressured to do it. And then I wouldn't. Like I had one therapist who was like, have you talked to your mom? And I'm like, no, because that's just not me. Like I don't talk out loud to my parents a lot. And by the way, if you do, that's amazing. Like it's literally amazing. I just don't tend to naturally find myself doing it unless I'm in a place where I'm really moved and really alone. But I found that the less I pressure myself to like force myself to find these connection points, these memories, the more naturally they'll just come up, the opportunities. And I'll see when there's an opportunity. It's become obvious to me. I mean, I've been living with this grief thing for 15 years. So I'm not like a super veteran, but like, I mean, I'm pretty well acquainted with it. And so, you know, I also tell bedtime stories. I turn my parents into like superheroes sometime during bedtime stories. And even like the other day, it's not always connected with my kids. Like I want to be clear, like if you don't have kids, like they're many ways to stay connected with a person's memory. It just happens to be that this is like the top of mind ideas. Like I was like trying to convince my son that he wants to go to 2 weeks of sleepaway camp this summer, which he is, even if he decides he doesn't want to, because I'd like him to get some COVID independence here. And my husband and I started talking about like all the pranks that we used to play on our friends and each other in camp. And we started like really laughing, thinking about, I remember I was like laughing, thinking about all the pranks. And then I was like, oh, do you know that like your grandpa Ray played this prank at camp? And I remember my dad telling me about how he would like short sheet all of his friends' beds and like dip their hands in warm water while they were sleeping overnight so they would pee, which is like disgusting, but boys, you know? And so like these moments just happen. And that's something that is, at least in my experience, some come with time, not in the early days. In the early days, that was just really shitty, a lot of it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. My next question for you is a portion of the book that stuck out to me was your note on patience and trust. And I love that you said ultimately it's about finding someone who understands you and who you feel you can trust with the most private and difficult thoughts and experiences of your life. But they don't have to be like you to understand you and treat you with respect. And when you talk about how therapists might not have been through it, but they want to, and that's empathy. So could you talk a little bit more about the concept of trust and patience and trust? I think people really struggle with finding that person right off the bat. Some do, some don't. I think Modern Loss is a great place to find more community. What comes up for you when I say this? We have a very exciting announcement that we are giving away 3 copies of this guide to our Dying of Laughter listeners. All you have to do is follow Modern Loss, Dying of Laughter, and Running Press on Instagram. And you can leave a comment on the post just saying, I'm entering, or I'm here, or what it do, whatever is good for you. So just head on over to the Dying of Laughter Instagram. Make sure you're following me there and following Rebecca at Modern Loss and our partner, Running Press. Leave a comment on the post with Rebecca's face. You can't miss it. And just say, I'm here, I'm entering. And you are in. This contest will end in 1 week on May 24th, and I'll announce the 3 winners 1 week from today on May 25th.
I mean, I think that people really need to know that they should trust their gut. You know, like I really feel like people need to understand that they should trust their gut, that they should, if they're in the presence of someone in conversation with someone who's maybe making them feel like they're a little bit full of toxic positivity or a little toxic in general, or like, you know, trying to negate the reality of what you're going through, or, you know, question it, that's telling. And maybe you're comfortable enough with that person to say, hey, like this makes me feel uncomfortable and this is how I really feel. And maybe they'll take that to heart and say, I'm so glad you shared that with me, I'm going to do better. I mean, it's always worth doing that with somebody. But if they don't, then you need to make some decisions about who's best for being in your orbit. I mean, that's really up to you. And I'm a big proponent of trying to find people who are in your orbit who make you not feel like crap. There's enough of that in the world. The world is crappy enough. You need to surround yourself with people who you feel have at least like an unconscious vested interest in you living a good life and aren't going to try and put barriers around you to do that. And so when it comes to therapy, yeah, I mean, I think like sometimes it does take a few times to get the right fit. It certainly took me a couple of times to get the right grief counselor. It really needed to be someone I was comfortable with. It needed to be a copacetic personality fit. As you can tell, I'm very chatty. I needed somebody who could really direct me, not just let me go and feel like I was dumping out everything after a week and then like coming back and dumping again, like because I did that a couple times and it didn't feel like I was going anywhere. What really helped was when I found somebody who could take what I was saying and like ask me questions based on that and try and direct me into like the next part of the conversation. You know, you really need to, when it comes to therapy, you'll know if you're not feeling great about them, chances are they're not the right fit. And there are a lot of therapists out there. And the best part about therapy right now, I would say, like one of the only COVID silver linings is that so much is accessible remotely. Like I literally do Zoom therapy in the front seat of my Tiguan every week. That's where I've met my therapist in real life one total time. You know, I'm a big proponent of that.
Yes, Beautiful. I've never met mine personally. In
Right. Like they may or may
2 years.
not even exist. Like,
Yeah, yeah. It could be a robot the entire time and we wouldn't know. No, I think it's so, especially for people who are extremely busy. I mean, of course, in person, I'm always a proponent. I think that's very powerful and important if and when possible. But for others, perhaps the weekly consistency of not going is the answer. And I've actually missed significantly less sessions. When I went in person, I would miss all the time for busyness in life and auditions. And now I'm very consistent with the Zoom. Have you found that you've been able to create more consistency with your online experience in therapy as well?
actually, I have. I feel like I'm like I have been a little bit of a canceler in life. Also because as a New Yorker, like you just kind of become a canceler because there's always traffic or delays and our work goes, it's just like so impossible to like get anything done when you're supposed to do it in the city because of just like the pace of life and the public transportation issues.
Yes.
But yeah, like I do feel like removing the commute, like there's very few excuses left.
Right, right.
And it's been good for me.
Yes, yes. And thank you for the honesty too, because anyone listening, people are going to be like, I don't know if I can commit to weekly therapy. It's like,
You should all be committing to
yes.
weekly. Come
But
on.
hey,
Every single person in the world needs to be in therapy right now.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
But
right.
hey, but even if you can't make it every week, like you and I have canceled and we're still here. We're still showing up and it can be overwhelming for people to find the person like you're saying. So again, thank you for your honesty that it took you a few tries too.
Yeah, it can take time, but like they're out there, and also I understand it can be exhausting to find that person. It's like looking for a job. You're like, oh, it's like a full-time job looking for a therapist. You like it sucks. You might have to have a couple long initial conversations with someone, but it's worth it because you have to think about the long game. Like you have to think about the fact that this could be a years-long relationship that could really help you get to a better place and help you build, come up with tools and coping mechanisms and like really, therapy isn't everything, but nothing is everything. It's one part of like your arsenal. Oh, I hate that word when it comes to loss metaphor. It's one part of your toolkit where that's going to help you to live with this loss thing, in addition to your social network and like the world around you and staying connected to your person and figuring out what your mind needs and your body needs and all that stuff.
Beautiful. Completely agree. Rebecca, I've read both of your books, so I know the differences, but in your own words, could you share the biggest difference between your first book and your second and what you hope people take away from this guide specifically? They're, of course, completely different products, but for someone who might not have read either, I'd love to hear from you in your own words.
Yeah. So the first book is called, it's basically the tagline of Modern Loss, Candid Conversation About Grief, Beginners Welcome. It's a book that I'm incredibly proud of. I co-wrote it with my co-founder, Gabby Berkner, who is my co-founder of Modern Loss, who I love dearly. And she and I wrote extensively for the book, but it's really a collection of essays, of short essays, first person essays. And there are 40 contributors from all around the world. And the book is divided up into sections like collateral damage and trigger days and, absence plus time and intimacy. So, like all of these different grief experience umbrellas under which we get into more specifics through these essays. Also, it's heavily illustrated. We have this amazing illustrator, Peter Arkle, who just did the best stuff. I mean, the illustrations are just like bespoke artwork. I mean, they're amazing and they really enhance the prose. But this book, well, it's solo authored by me, so it's terrifying. I had a lot of advice from my therapeutic, advisory base who helped me and contributed to different sections, and they're all in the acknowledgments. And I culled a lot from the modern loss community, but like it was all on me. Like there was no one else putting this thing together. And that was so scary, but it also felt like so right, while I was doing it. And so this is more like it's first person throughout the entire book. I am talking to you as your friend, as your friendly grief guide, who also has a little bit of tough love in her, but also will hand you like a martini when you need it. And
Yes.
I'm there to guide you through, as we said earlier, ways to stay connected to your person, stay connected to yourself, and stay connected to the world around you. Because when you do those three things, that's when you're really set up to build this post-traumatic growth and figure out ways to kind of like carve out meaning and live richly in ways that you want to, because you feel like you're taking care of yourself as you should. And so there's a lot of writing and there's a lot of illustrations. It's very, very illustrated too. There's a lot of like fun one-offs and there's some cartoons. And I had some fun with like, what grief really looks like. I mean, you'll see there's a lot of like mental palate cleansers in there. And I do think, I mean, I can't, it's so obnoxious to say, but I do think that it's funny in parts. Like I do. I mean,
Agreed.
it's supposed to be, because you can't just rend your clothes throughout this entire experience. You can't. You have to feel like you're a human. You have to feel like you're laughing, like you're being given permission to like be bawdy about it or like joke about it or find the gallows humor, because that's just, that's what grief is. You have to be reminded that you're still you. And also, if I were really heavy handed about the whole thing, you're not going to come back for more. You'll read like 1,000 words and then you'll be like, I'm literally freaked out.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this next to like chicken soup for the soul or whatever. So in addition to my writing, as we have already said, there are a lot of exercises, interactive exercises.
Yeah, no, the illustrations are beautiful, and the way that you do such an excellent job of infusing humor into the modern lost world, specifically on your Instagram. Your grief memes are fire. So because we're talking about humor, and it is the Dying of Laughter podcast, yeah, in your own words, how do you feel that humor has helped you, not only with your own loss, but with the modern loss community at large?
It's been so much. I mean, like, there will always be people who have a problem with the fact that I smile. There will always be people who have an issue with how happy I look sometimes. There have been interviews I have done with, visual media where there are some viewers who are like, her tone just doesn't, it just doesn't, I don't know, it's like disrespectful. And I'm like, well, I don't really agree, but like then this isn't for you. But as you can hear, I'm not like always making jokes and laughing and everything, but I do feel that when there is room for warmth and some levity when you're talking about grief, which is what I do all day long every day, then you need to grab onto it, because I guarantee you're going to feel like crap again. Like, don't worry, like you'll feel sad again. You're going to feel like it's hard again. You're going to feel upset. So when a moment of levity and lightness pops up, like, why wouldn't you take it? Like, why wouldn't you have a good laugh that's like about something really dark? Why wouldn't you bond over, like, I mean, I could tell the anecdote that I told in the book because it's just like one of my favorite ones.
Please.
It's not even my anecdote, but it was a friend of mine and it was his grandmother's funeral. And they were like lowering her casket into the ground. And there was this like gust of wind. Like, it was very somber, like, setting. And there was this gust of wind and the kippah blew off cousin Stevie's head. And everyone was like staring at cousin Stevie. And the kippah ended up falling onto the coffin, which had already been lowered onto the ground. So it was like going to be buried with grandma. And everybody was, looking at it kind of like, and then cousin Stevie says, damn, that was real leather. And like everyone just lost it. And it was gravesite. I mean, like, you were like in the moment. So like when people say, when can I laugh? When is it appropriate to laugh? I mean, whenever laughter finds you, why wouldn't you? It doesn't mean you're not like making fun of like your person who died. You're finding levity in a moment or in an experience that feels so ludicrous that sometimes what can you do but laugh?
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. And I feel that people are either consciously or unconsciously moving through their grief with some levity. So why not do so consciously and with joy and owning it? Because if not, we're going to do it a little bit anyways and perhaps not know how we feel about that. Obsessed with the anecdote. Thank you for plugging that here. I mean, that really does just sum it up. Like, just sum it up. One of my anecdotes that is also not my anecdotes, I wonder if I've told you this before, is one of my friends, when her mom died, she was at the gravesite with her grandmother, and it happened to be her birthday, and the grandma was like, I forgot to give you your present, and like slipped her a $50 bill as they were lowering her into the ground. And she was like, thanks, grandma, for $50 or whatever the story was. So, you just have to laugh.
Yeah, you have to. You just have to. I mean, you don't have to. I'm not going to make you.
You don't
but
have
like,
to.
you shouldn't feel
Yes.
guilty if you do.
Yes, exactly. Rebecca, what can people glean from the audio format? Are you narrating, and what does the audio format look like? I saw on Amazon there was one. So is that correct?
It is available on Kindle. It's available as an audiobook. It's available in like all the ways in which you can have a book available to you. I don't know if it's available in large print. I would love that because you know how you see books like, would you like the large print version? And I'm actually like, yes, I would. I would like the large print version because it's hard for me to read right now. In fact, when I got my galleys, I was like, I emailed my publisher and I'm like, can you read this? Like, is it too small? And they're like, no. You're just ancient.
Not at all. That's
so
amazing.
yeah, so it's available in all the ways. And I did narrate the audiobook, and it really struck me after the book was written that an audiobook is awesome for this. It actually works really, really well. I just simply hadn't thought about it beforehand because I was just focused on like writing a book. But afterwards, I was like, oh, this is actually really great because some people really want to feel like they have a friend in their ear. And then it comes with a downloadable PDF. So all the exercises are still there. And it's really kind of like your jam. Like, what do you want to like? Are you in the car a lot? Do you want to drive and listen to me talk to you? And I speak very much the way in which I write. So it's like six of one, half a dozen of the other. Like, do you not mind my voice? Then get the audiobook. Are you in your car? Do you want to walk around listening to me? That's cool. Or do you want the hardcover? Great. Like, I don't care.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that you narrated it. That's really, really cool.
It was
Rebecca.
intense.
Yeah.
It was intense.
Have you ever done something like that before? Did you narrate your first book?
I did not. I wasn't given the option because it was co-authored, and also there were male and female voices in the book, and they just were like, well, here are the options that we have for that. So yeah, I didn't do it. I did this one, which I think makes more sense because this is more like memoir.
Yes.
And I really loved it. Like, I felt like I kind of became acquainted with the material in a new way by reading it out loud, and I appreciated it in different ways, and I didn't realize some of the parts that were hard until I read them out loud, and I was like, oh, this is a hard part, to do, like to think about or go through or write. And so yeah, I really love doing it, and I'm now a super fan of entertainer spray. So anybody who needs to talk a lot is like the best product I've ever come across. It like enables you to speak for like 20 hours, over the course of like 3 days without completely losing your voice.
Really? You spray it in the back of your mouth?
You spray it, like you spray your vocal. It's basically you're like WD-40ing your vocal cords.
I can't believe I don't know
like
about
it
this.
may
What
be
is it made out
WD-40.
of?
I don't know, but it's I just know that like, and at the end of the first day, it was a friend of mine who's an actor. I mean, she's a, musical theater. And she's like, get the entertainer spray. And I was like, okay. And I Googled it, and there's just a website. It's like entertainer spray, and you like order it on PayPal. And I'm like, I'm spraying this into my body. Maybe I shouldn't just like delightedly quickly email it and be so eager. But like, that's me. I just kind of jump first stupidly.
Oh, I'm instantly down. Like, I'm already sold. I know nothing. I haven't looked it up, but I'm like, I'm into
Get the entertainer. This is a plug for entertainer spray. It was so great because I went through the first day and I was like carefully spraying my vocal cords in the back. And I did it like in the morning, and I thought you were supposed to do it like once. And then by like 1 o'clock, my throat felt like it was falling off. Like, I was like, I think I have COVID. I didn't have COVID. I had just been talking for like 6 straight hours. And so the next day I sprayed every hour, and I was like, oh my God, like I could be on stage at the Met tonight. Like, I mean, no one would want me to do that, but I felt like I still had vocal power.
That is incredible. Well, thank you for that plug. I can't believe I don't know about it. And I literally just...
That was an enjoyable segue. Thank you for letting me remember that.
It is very enjoyable. That is so good to know. And did you record it at a studio, or did you do it from home with COVID? Curious what that was.
No, I did it at a studio. In New York City. Yeah. It was during Omicron v1.0 in January, and it was great. It was also great because I am very COVID cautious. Like, I still wear masks inside. I'm very like, I live my life. I mean, I go out, I have a life and whatever, but I'm pretty cautious. And so I really was delighted that I could do this because I was nervous that it wouldn't happen, but it was just me and the engineer. And then it was like just me in a sound studio. I was literally in a padded room alone. So I felt pretty
Right.
comfortable.
Yes. You're like, it is just me. And I'm glad that's what ended up happening, just because the vocal quality is better in a studio.
Yes,
And because
yes.
this is such a large project,
Yes.
I was hoping that would be the case. So congratulations on that. That's something I'm really looking forward to checking out in a whole new way. It feels
Thank
like you're
you.
saying, it's completely different. It's almost like you get two completely different products out there, because people could even do both and have a totally different experience. So that's really, really cool. You're like, I know. I'm just so fascinated in audio format. So I'm like, let's talk all about that. So yay, that's very, very cool. Rebecca, just a few more questions here. Because you are the founder of Modern Loss, which is very much a community, a newsletter, and many other things in addition to these fabulous books, can you share a little bit more about where people can get started? They've lost someone, they've never heard of Modern Loss. I would say check out the Instagram first because the memes are fantastic, but would love to hear from you as to how people can get involved.
Thank you. I do love making the memes, and it's been a little overwhelming lately, so I haven't made so many. And I really just, like Ben Affleck is my grief muse. So I like I haven't done one based on his engagement yet, but I really need to. But Modern Loss, like we're kind of everywhere. It's really choose your own adventure. Like you, I am partial to our Instagram account, which I really love at Modern Loss, mostly because it's just such a low touch way to be in a community. It's literally all free. I mean, like, I'm not selling you anything. I'm selling you my book, but like, I guarantee I'm not making money off of this book anymore. That's not like where you go to make your wealth. It's really full of like, I put our latest articles out there. I put questions, illustrations, grief memes, etc. Share news about events, but also like pose questions that people should answer in the comments. And like so many people really get something out of connecting with each other in the comments. People have become friends with each other. They've started following each other. And I just love that so much because that is literally what Modern Loss's mission is to spark community and peer-to-peer support and educate people about what it really is like to live with loss across the long arc and live well and live with resilience. So love Instagram, but we're also on Twitter, which is like, let's be honest, Twitter is more like, to put things out there, but it's not like, that's not like our primary source of, that's not our primary focus. Very, very active on Facebook. And then of course, our website is modernloss.com. There are upwards of 1,000 original pieces on there, practical resources, advice columns, personal essays, so many things, which are written by so many people other than myself. I've written a small handful for the site because this is about community, and they're all highly edited and curated. This is a publication, so it's not like a blog or a listserv or whatever. And then of course there's the Modern Loss Substack, which is a newsletter that I run, and it's modernloss.substack.com. And that's I try and put out once a month. It's been a little bit less frequent in the last few months just because of honestly COVID life, parenting life, working for oneself life. But I do deep dive interviews with people who are kind of more bold-faced names. Like I've had Cynthia Nixon, we have Diedrich Bader on tap, Stacey London, the stylist. So, relation of yours? I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I'm just smiling because your interviews are wonderful and they're so exciting.
I love them. I love having them because it really is a nice challenge for me because like at heart, I'm a journalist. And so it enables me to like do my entrepreneurial journalism thing, but get people to talk about, things that are germane to modern loss, but are entertaining and sometimes funny and helpful. And so I really do love the newsletter, which is free. And then there is a paid version, which I particularly love because we offer virtual events every single month. So if you're a paid subscriber, I mean, it's literally like $8 a month. Okay. You can do yoga for grief support every month on Zoom. You could do a mindfulness session with our mindfulness expert. We just had a session on competitive grieving with two authors talking about like, what is grieving in private versus public look like? Like we have a lot of really awesome, cool conversations, and that enables us, that subscriber base enables us to keep doing everything else we do for zero cost to the world.
Beautiful. Obsessed. Signed, sealed, delivered. These are all great things to know. Wait, I'm super interested in the competitive grieving is so interesting to me because, I mean, as you know, putting your own stories out there are important in terms of people establishing a connection with you. But then there is something that is interesting. Like I personally only try and share like here and there about my story. But when I do, that's actually what connects people. But I'm like, I'm totally cool to not do that. But it's like, for even you talking about your parents, people are going to feel a connection with you. But then some people do it like all the time. Some don't. Anyways, I would love to hear what those people said about that. You're sparking my interest, Rebecca.
It's like a bottomless pot of coffee. You can talk about, there's so much to talk about all the time. And that's why like people are like, oh, are you tired of doing this? I'm like, no, I'm probably more passionate about it than I ever was, because I think the whole world is grieving and the whole world needs more people who are willing to talk about it in ways that are really open and raw and warm,
Yes, and that is exactly what you are doing, which is
And
incredible.
you.
So, well, thank you. I'm very, very excited for this next book. This is wonderful. And then I feel like this is something interesting because I don't actually personally like when people are like, and then what's the next thing you're doing? Because you're doing the biggest thing in the entire world. But I am personally curious. Do you have an idea for a third book at some point in the future?
I do. I'm not going to share it right now because it's like, it's like a half-baked thing in my brain. But yes, I do. I always have a lot of ideas. It's about time and bandwidth and like whether I can afford to do them because, like I said, you don't go into the grief world to make wealth. You do it because you really believe in it. And that's literally why I'm here.
Beautiful. Well, I hope well, I don't know. I hope it creates wealth for you
No,
as well because you're
it's
working
not.
so
I mean
hard.
it like in like, I think that there's when you work in grief and then you have something like a book, I think that there are some extreme minority people who would say, oh, like they're trying to make money off of people's pain. And the answer is like,
No.
no,
No.
no. Like,
No.
no, we're not. We're really not. We are just writing a book that we really believe in, that we think can help people. And the book takes time to write, so it costs money to write. And then we sell it because paper and ink and production cost money. So this is why it is for sale, and we are selling it and marketing it. But we're also marketing it because that's what authors have to do these days. It's on our shoulders to really get the word out. It's just kind of incumbent upon us. And it's hard, it's hard work.
Absolutely. And I'm a big believer in people getting paid for their time and their energy. And certainly in artist world and creative worlds, there's a lot of opportunities to put your things out there for free, which is also very generous, appreciated, and important. Yet to what point is that? And then with charitable aspects, it does complicate things. But of course, you should sell your book. You can't give a book for free. That doesn't make sense. So no, of course, Rebecca, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm going to turn the microphone to you. Do you have closing thoughts for our listeners on what we're talking about today? And do you have any questions for me?
My closing thoughts are really that I really hope you guys do try the book because I really honestly think it can help. And I also think that if you don't want it for yourself, I would recommend getting it for somebody else because I also don't think there's anything wrong with giving a product to someone that can help themselves. I really was looking for a way to help myself for a really long time. And I really wish that I had something like this. And that's why I wrote it. And now I'm really glad that I do have something like this because I wrote all the answers a couple months ago when I was going through the galley. And I was like, wow, like this is as germane today to me as it was years ago because I have a different relationship with my parents than I did so many years ago. Different memories, different wishes and desires and reflections. And so I guess, like, yeah, like give it a whirl and let me know what you think about it. I'm really easy to find online. And more than anything, just like go easy on yourselves. It's been a really hard time in the world. The world is really dark right now. It's really hard to find hope and possibility. It's really easy to feel dejected. It's really easy to feel like you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like or your life is going to look like because we keep getting proven that we don't have control over any of this stuff. And we don't have a lot of control over it. But you got to be kind to yourself and acknowledge that the stuff that you're going through, be it like personal grief or the layers of societal grief that we're going through, are all very, very real. And if you're like not in a place on Tuesday at 9 to do like, thank you, next, like, let's go to the next conference call. Like, that's because this stuff is real that we're going through, and it's worthy of acknowledging how hard it is and speaking up for what you need in order to muddle through it better, be it from friends or your employer or your partner or anyone.
Wonderful. I so appreciate you being here, Rebecca. It means the world to have you. I'm just so inspired by you. It's wonderful to hear more about the behind the scenes of this creative process. I feel like next year, part 3, if I'm lucky enough to talk to you a third time in a year, I feel like I would want to do a deep dive on the behind the scenes of you creating the community. And I say that as like I have so many more questions for you, but I'm going to leave it there so that we keep to an hour so that people will listen to the whole thing. Thank you for coming. Where can people connect with you online and follow Modern Loss on Instagram and all the good stuff?
Yeah, at Modern Loss everywhere, like Instagram, Twitter. There's a Modern Loss page on Facebook. If you're a paid subscriber, that you get access to our closed group, which is this amazing peer-to-peer support group on Facebook, which I love, 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 love. It's an awesome group of people. And I'm at Rebecca Soffer, Soffer, on Twitter, Instagram. I think my Facebook is like somewhat private. I don't know. But yeah, it's pretty easy to find us. And then, of course, modernloss.com and modernloss.substack.com.
Beautiful. And then, Rebecca, how I'm closing my interviews these days. This is new since last year. Well, for fun, I'm going to show you. This was my sign I had at my Jewish funeral birthday. So I'm ending my interviews by asking you, when's your birthday and what's a favorite tradition or moment that you have around your own birthday? Because we start about grief and we end it on birth.
Well, I love that question, and I love the order. I'm so sad I couldn't fly across the country to your Jewish funeral themed birthday. And in fact, my first book launch, we had a Shiva spread for food. That was when you could do lots of buffets, in public, and it was so much fun. But I would say my favorite birthday tradition and my only birthday tradition is reading the Happy Birthday to You book by Dr. Seuss. It's something that my dad always read to me every year. And it is like, I don't know if you know it, but it's just the best book. And it's so much fun to read out loud because also, by the way, Dr. Seuss apparently was like an awful person. And I didn't know this until the last recent several years, but okay. I still grew up reading the Happy Birthday to You book, and I can't really remove that from my touch points. It's just a really fun book to read out loud, and it's just delightful. And that's my tradition. And I read it to myself and with my kids on my birthday, every birthday. And it's the original copy from my dad from 19 redacted. And it's inscribed to me from my dad. And so that's my birthday tradition.
How cool. See, you learn. It's such a fun thing to ask people because people always have something very specific or unique, or they're like, I don't do anything. There's just such an opinion I find around birthdays. And then when is your birthday?
My birthday is on June 24th. I'm a new Cancer. I'm an early Cancer.
That's a whole other chat. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here. Everyone, go buy this fabulous book. Will you say the name of it one more time?
It's called The Modern Loss Handbook, an interactive guide to moving through grief and building your resilience.
Beautiful, Rebecca. This was awesomesauce.com. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much. Okay. This was the best. You made my day.
You made my day. Yodo, you only die once.